The galaxy was vast, endless, and indifferent. Billions of stars scattered across the cosmos like grains of sand on an infinite beach. Humanity had stretched its reach far beyond Earth, colonizing planets, mining moons, and building orbital stations that floated silently among the void. Yet despite their technological marvels, humanity remained fractured, divided by greed, politics, and mistrust. And now, something ancient and terrifying stirred in the darkness, threatening to tear apart everything they had built. It began on Delta 9, a remote research outpost orbiting the edge of a dying star system. Dr. Alara Voss stared at her console, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the dials. She had been tracking gravitational anomalies for weeks, subtle ripples in space-time that defied explanation. At first, she thought it might be a natural phenomenon, a collapsing star or some rogue black hole wandering too close. But what she saw now chilled her to the bone. On her screen, a pattern emerged, a pulse, rhythmic and deliberate, emanating from deep within the accretion disk of a nearby black hole. It wasn't random noise, it was a signal, a message. Her heart raced as she decoded fragments of data, piecing together coordinates and timestamps. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. And then came the transmission, a single burst of static-filled words that sent shivers down her spine. One cry of desperation, humanity mobilized or we are doomed. Alara leaned back in her chair, staring at the blinking red alert on her monitor. The voice was mechanical, distorted, but unmistakably human. Whoever sent it knew about the anomaly and feared it. She tried tracing the origin, but the signal vanished almost instantly, swallowed by the chaos of the black hole's gravity well. All she had left were those haunting words and a set of cryptic coordinates pointing straight toward the event horizon. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she pored over every scrap of data, cross-referencing it with historical records and classified archives. What she found terrified her further. Over the past few months, several colonies along the outer rim had gone dark, entire populations vanishing without warning. Official reports blamed pirate raids or resource shortages, but none of the explanations added up. Now, seeing this signal, she realized the truth. Something was out there, consuming worlds one by one. By morning, Alara had compiled enough evidence to convince anyone, not just scientists, but leaders, generals, anyone who would listen. She transmitted her findings to the Galactic Council, the governing body overseeing human expansion across the stars. But instead of action, her warnings were met with skepticism. Politicians dismissed her claims as alarmist ramblings, while corporate executives accused her of fabricating data to secure funding for her failing outpost. Frustrated but undeterred, Alara reached out directly to Captain Rin Calder, a name synonymous with survival against impossible odds. Calder was a legend, a battle-hardened pilot whose exploits during the frontier wars had earned him both admiration and disdain. He had spent years navigating the lawless edges of explored space, taking jobs no one else dared to touch. Recently, however, he'd retreated from public life, living aboard his battered freighter Shadowstrike, docked at a distant trading hub. When Alara's encrypted message reached him, Calder hesitated. He'd seen enough horrors in his lifetime to know when trouble loomed, but he also knew better than to get involved in someone else's mess. Still, something about her tone struck a chord. Against his better judgment, he agreed to meet her. At Delta 9 was a lonely place, a skeletal structure of metal and glass clinging to existence amidst the wreckage of dead stars. As Calder approached in his ship, he couldn't help but notice how quiet it seemed. No bustling activity, no chatter on the comms, just silence. When he stepped onto the station, the airlock hissed open to reveal Alara waiting for him, her face pale but resolute. "Thanks for coming," she said, extending a hand. Calder shook it briefly, his sharp eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor behind her. "You're lucky I'm not busy," he replied gruffly. "What's so urgent?" Without another word, Alara led him to her lab. Holographic displays flickered around them, showing graphs, charts, and grainy images of the black hole. She explained everything: the signal, the missing colonies, the growing threat lurking within the void. Calder listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he crossed his arms and exhaled slowly. "So you're telling me there's some kind of alien weapon inside that thing?" he asked, nodding toward the swirling mass of light and shadow projected above them. "I don't know what it is," Alara admitted, "but whatever it is, it's moving closer. If we don't act soon, Earth could be next." Calder rubbed his jaw, considering her words. He'd faced death more times than he cared to count, but this felt different. This wasn't just about saving himself or his crew, it was about saving everyone. For once, maybe he had a chance to make things right. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help you sound the alarm, but if we're going to stop this, we'll need more than just theories. We'll need proof." Over the next few days, Alara and Calder worked tirelessly, gathering every piece of evidence they could find. They hacked into restricted databases, intercepted encrypted transmissions, and even ventured into uncharted sectors to document the devastation firsthand. Along the way, they recruited others to their cause. Lieutenant Cale Arden, a fiery young officer seeking vengeance for the destruction of his homeworld. Dr. Mira Solis, a xenobiologist fascinated by the possibility of extraterrestrial life. And Commander Elias Drake, a seasoned soldier weary of war but unwilling to let humanity fall. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance, united by a shared sense of urgency. Their efforts culminated in an emergency summit aboard the orbital Station Unity Nexus, a sprawling complex designed to foster cooperation among humanity's disparate factions. Representatives from governments, corporations, and independent colonies gathered in the central chamber, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holograms displaying Alara's findings. At first, the meeting descended into chaos. Accusations flew, alliances crumbled, and egos clashed. But as Alara presented her case, showing footage of vanished colonies, mapping the weapon's trajectory, and playing the ominous transmission, the room fell silent. The weight of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a crisis. It was extinction, knocking at their door. "We can argue later," Calder said, stepping forward. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Right now we need to decide, do we fight or do we die?" Reluctantly, the leaders agreed to pool their resources and launch a mission to investigate the black hole. Calder volunteered to lead the expedition, commanding the newly christened Eclipse Vanguard, a state-of-the-art vessel equipped with experimental technology designed to withstand the extreme conditions near the event horizon. The crew consisted of scientists, soldiers, and diplomats, each bringing unique skills to the table. As preparations began, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Trust was fragile, strained by decades of conflict and competition. Supplies were limited, deadlines tight, and doubts lingered about whether they stood any real chance of success. Worse still, mysterious incidents plagued the mission from the start. Equipment malfunctioned, communications were jammed, and whispers of betrayal spread among the ranks. Despite these challenges, the crew pressed on, driven by a shared determination to protect their species. On the day of departure, as the Eclipse Vanguard launched into the void, a final transmission crackled over the comms. "You cannot stop it. You can only awaken it." The words hung heavy in the air, echoing through the ship's corridors. For a moment, fear gripped the crew, freezing them in place. Then Calder's voice broke the silence. "Whatever's waiting for us out there," he said, gripping the controls, "we'll face it together." And with that, the Eclipse Vanguard disappeared into the swirling abyss, leaving behind a galaxy holding its breath. The moment the Eclipse Vanguard crossed the event horizon, reality itself seemed to shatter. Time stretched and contracted unpredictably. Colors shifted into impossible hues, and the crew found themselves surrounded by a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The ship's instruments went haywire, readings flickering between extremes as if the very fabric of space-time was unraveling around them. Captain Rin Calder gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white against the dim glow of the cockpit lights. "Stay sharp," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Beside him, Lieutenant Cale Arden monitored the navigation systems, his youthful face pale but determined. "Gravity spikes ahead. Kale warned, pointing at the swirling vortex on the main display. We're being pulled toward something. What is it? Dr. Ilara Voss asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. She stood near the rear of the bridge, studying holographic projections of the alien signal patterns they'd intercepted earlier. Her eyes darted back and forth, trying to make sense of the shifting data. I don't know, Kale admitted. But whatever it is, it's big. As the ship hurtled deeper into the maelstrom, strange phenomena began to manifest. Floating fragments of alien architecture drifted past the viewport. Massive slabs of metallic material etched with intricate designs that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly energy. Some pieces bore symbols resembling the ones from Ilara's research, while others were completely unfamiliar. Then came the visions. At first they were subtle, a fleeting image here, a whispered sound there. But soon, each member of the crew experienced vivid hallucinations tailored specifically to their fears and desires. For Ilara, it was the ghostly figure of her late mentor, accusing her of failing humanity. For Kyle, it was the burning ruins of his homeworld, the cries of the dying echoing in his ears. Even Calder wasn't spared. He saw the faces of his former crewmates, lost during a failed mission years ago, blaming him for their deaths. These aren't just random images, Dr. Mirasola said softly, clutching her tablet. She had been analyzing the phenomenon since it began, her wide eyes reflecting both awe and terror. Their memories, our deepest regrets, our greatest failures. This place is feeding off us. It's testing us, Ilara added, her voice trembling slightly. Like it's probing our minds to see if we're worthy. Worthy of what? No one dared to ask aloud. Midway through their journey, the crew stumbled upon a hidden chamber buried within the debris field. Its entrance was marked by a massive archway adorned with glowing runes that pulsed in sync with their heartbeats. As they approached, the air grew heavier, charged with static electricity that made their skin prickle. Inside, they discovered holographic recordings left behind by the weapon's creators. The figures appeared humanoid but alien, their elongated limbs and luminous eyes giving them an ethereal quality. They spoke in a melodic language which Ilara quickly translated using the fragments of code she'd deciphered earlier. The weapon was never meant to destroy, she explained, her voice filled with wonder and dread. It was designed to unite, to test whether warring species could overcome their differences and work together for the greater good. And if they fail? Commander Elias Drake asked grimly, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. They are erased, Ilara replied, swallowing hard. Their civilizations wiped out, leaving only ruins as a warning to others. The revelation sent a wave of unease through the group. If this was true, then humanity's survival depended not just on stopping the weapon, but proving themselves worthy of existence. It was a daunting realization, one that weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Tensions reached a breaking point during a harrowing escape from a collapsing section of the artifact. Massive chunks of debris rained down around them, forcing the crew to flee through narrow corridors filled with treacherous traps. At one critical juncture, a support beam collapsed, pinning Lieutenant Kyle beneath its weight. "Leave me," Kale shouted, struggling futilely against the crushing force. "Save yourselves. No one gets left behind," Calder barked, grabbing a hydraulic jack from his utility belt. With Elias's help, he managed to lift the beam just enough for Kale to crawl free, but the delay cost them precious seconds. As they sprinted toward the exit, part of the ceiling gave way, sealing off their path. "There's no way out," Mira cried, backing away from the rubble. "Yes, there is," Ilara said firmly, pulling up a schematic of the structure on her tablet. She pointed to a ventilation shaft above them. "Through there, it leads directly to the core." Scaling the shaft was a perilous task, requiring every ounce of strength and determination they possessed. When they finally emerged into the central chamber, they were greeted by a sight that defied comprehension. The core of the weapon wasn't mechanical, it was alive. A pulsating mass of crystalline tendrils stretched upward like roots seeking sunlight, emitting waves of energy that resonated with their very souls. In the center floated a shimmering orb, its surface rippling with countless reflections of stars, planets, and galaxies. "It knows us," Calder whispered, staring at the entity in awe. "It knows everything." Before anyone could react, the orb flared brightly, bathing the room in blinding light. When the glare subsided, the crew found themselves standing in a surreal dreamscape, a representation of their collective consciousness. Images of Earth, their loved ones, and their hopes for the future swirled around them, intertwined with scenes of war, destruction, and loss. "You have come far," a voice echoed, neither male nor female, ancient yet timeless. "But your trials are not over. Will you rise above your divisions, or will you fall prey to your own flaws?" One by one, the crew faced challenges designed to push them to their limits. Ilara confronted her fear of failure, choosing to trust her instincts even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Kale let go of his thirst for revenge, realizing that justice lay in building a better future, rather than destroying the present. And Calder forgave himself for past mistakes, vowing to protect those who depended on him. Each victory brought them closer to understanding the weapon's purpose and their own potential. By working together, they demonstrated qualities the AI creators had deemed essential for survival: empathy, resilience, and unity. When the final trial ended, the dreamscape dissolved, returning them to the core chamber. The orb dimmed, its light softening as if acknowledging their success. For the first time since entering the black hole, the crew felt a glimmer of hope. "We did it," Ilara said, tears streaming down her face. "We passed the test." "But at what cost?" Calder asked quietly, looking at the weary faces of his team. Each of them carried scars, both visible and invisible, that would never fully heal. Still, they knew they had accomplished something extraordinary. The galaxy might still tremble under the weight of uncertainty, but humanity had proven it could rise above despair and fight for something greater than itself. As the Eclipse vanguard prepared to leave the black hole, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. Whatever awaited them beyond the void, they would face it together, as one. The Eclipse vanguard emerged from the black hole battered but intact, its hull scorched and systems strained to their limits. As the crew blinked against the sudden brightness of open space, they were greeted by an eerie silence. The galaxy beyond seemed frozen in time, stars twinkling faintly, ships drifting motionless, and comms channels eerily quiet. Whatever had happened inside the black hole had rippled outward, affecting not just their ship but the entire cosmos. Captain Rin Calder gripped the controls tightly, his jaw clenched as he surveyed the scene outside. "What did we do?" he muttered under his breath, half expecting the weapon or whatever it was to unleash destruction any second. "It hasn't destroyed anything," Dr. Ilara Voss said softly, her eyes locked on the glowing orb now embedded in the ship's central console. During their escape, the entity had transferred part of itself into the vessel, pulsating gently like a heartbeat. "It's waiting." "For what?" Lieutenant Cale Arden asked, his voice tinged with frustration. After all they'd endured, the visions, the trials, the sacrifices, they still didn't fully understand what they were dealing with. "For us to decide," Ilara replied, her tone resolute. She turned to face the crew, her expression calm but determined. "This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about proving we're ready to move forward, to become something better than we've been." Her words hung heavy in the air, echoing through the cramped confines of the bridge. Each member of the crew felt the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. They weren't just representatives of humanity. They were its ambassadors, standing at the precipice of a new era. Final test. Choices that define humanity as the orb flared brighter. The crew found themselves transported once again, not physically but mentally, into a realm where reality bent to the will of the entity. Here they faced their ultimate challenge, a series of impossible decisions designed to test not just their strength, but their morality. Choice 1. Sacrifice versus survival. The first trial presented them with a grim scenario. A fleet of refugee, Ships carrying millions of civilians approached a dying star system, its sun on the verge of collapse. Saving the refugees would require diverting resources meant to protect Earth, potentially dooming billions. Letting them perish ensured humanity's immediate survival, but condemned countless innocent lives. The debate was fierce. Some argued for pragmatism, while others insisted on compassion. In the end, it was Commander Elias Drake who broke the deadlock. "We save them," he declared, slamming his fist on the table. "If we start choosing who lives and dies, we're no better than the monsters we're fighting." The orb pulsed approvingly, its light warming slightly. Choice 2. Forgiveness versus revenge. Next came a vision of the corporate executives responsible for sabotaging the mission earlier. Their actions had cost lives, including those of several crew members. Now they begged for mercy, claiming they acted out of fear and ignorance. Lieutenant Cale Arden struggled the most with this decision. His homeworld had been destroyed due to similar greed and negligence, but instead of giving in to hatred, he chose forgiveness. "If we destroy them, we prove they were right about us," he said bitterly. "We show them we're nothing but animals." Again, the orb responded positively, its glow intensifying. Choice 3. Unity versus division. Finally, the crew was shown a fractured galaxy, a vision of humanity tearing itself apart over resources, ideologies, and power. The question was simple yet profound. Could they put aside their differences and work together, or would they let history repeat itself? This time, there was no argument. Exhausted but united, the crew stood shoulder to shoulder, pledging to spread the message of cooperation across the stars. Captain Calder spoke for them all. "We've fought wars, built walls, and turned our backs on each other for too long. If we want to survive, we have to change." With that, the orb erupted in a brilliant flash of light, bathing the crew in warmth and acceptance. When the light faded, they found themselves back aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, the entity now humming softly within the console. Galactic Impact, a beacon of hope moments. Later, the weapon transformed. Instead of unleashing destruction, it became a beacon, a radiant sphere of light that expanded outward, broadcasting a signal across the galaxy. The message was simple but powerful: unity. Species long divided by war and mistrust began reaching out to one another, inspired by humanity's example. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy felt connected. On Earth, people gathered in streets and squares, gazing up at the night sky as new constellations formed around the glowing beacon. Leaders who had once plotted against each other shook, hands vowing to work toward peace. Even the corporations, notorious for their exploitation, pledged to redirect their resources toward rebuilding and innovation. For the crew of the Eclipse Vanguard, the victory was bittersweet. They had saved the galaxy, but the cost weighed heavily on them. Loved ones were gone, and scars, both physical and emotional, remained. Still, they carried the knowledge that even in their darkest hour, humanity had chosen to rise above despair. Final scene. Legacy of hope back on Earth. Months after their return, the crew visited a small park near the outskirts of New Chicago. Children played under the shade of towering trees, laughing and pointing at the stars. One child, no older than 6, tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mommy, do you think we'll ever meet them?" he asked, his wide eyes fixed on the glowing patterns in the sky. His mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe someday," she replied. "But for now, knowing they're out there is enough." Nearby, Captain Calder watched the scene unfold, leaning against a bench with his arms crossed. Beside him, Alara Voss sat quietly, her gaze lost in the heavens. Neither spoke, but their shared silence said more than words ever could. They had done what once seemed impossible. They had awakened hope in a galaxy on the brink of ruin. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, they knew humanity's story was far from over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of orange and purple, Calder glanced at Alara. Think we made the right call? She looked at him, her lips curving into a faint smile. Only time will tell. But for now, I think we gave them a chance. And with that, they turned their eyes back to the stars, ready to face whatever came next. Together.